Today we're going to be learning Kiddushin Daf Ayin Bet. Today's daf is sponsored by the Hadran Zoom family. Ech naflu giborim. We share in the pain of our fellow learner Jerry Goldstein Gedalia on the tragic loss of her step-grandson, Sergeant Yosef Gedalia, Hashem Yikom Damo, who was among the first to fall and gave his life al Kedushat Hashem Ha'am V'Haaretz. Yosef's life touched so many profoundly. May Hashem bring nechama to the Gedalia family and to all of Am Yisrael. Ubila hamavet lenetzach u'macha dim'a me'al kol panim. Okay. We are going to get started. The Siyum is around the corner. So we actually have plans that are kind of matched and appropriate to what's going on. They'll come out in the next few days, but I'll already tell you that we're going to do the Siyum. We're technically finishing on Friday, but we're not going to do the Siyum on Friday because that's not a good day to do things internationally. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the Siyum on Sunday. And we're going, this is very important, especially for those on Zoom, we're going to learn on Friday the daf for Shabbat. Okay, so we'll start Bava Kama on Friday. We'll have the first daf on Friday, which really is meant to be on Shabbat. We'll do the second daf of Bava Kama Sunday morning. And on Sunday evening, Israel time, wherever that is, wherever you are, will be the Siyum. Okay, and plans for the Siyum will come out, God willing, in the next few days. We're a little short staffed because of the situation, so patience, but registration will be up at some point. Sunday is the Siyum, and we have an interesting Siyum plan, so put it in your calendars. Okay, now we're going to get started. We're in the middle of this question, Ad hechan hi Bavel. We've already established that Babylonia has better yuchsin, right? The people in Babylonia you can automatically trust, and you don't have to go doing a background check on them. Other people, again, we saw different approaches, whether you're supposed to do a background check, or we just say, if we don't know you're a mamzer, then we're certainly not going to check into it. But if you are a mamzer, and then there's a lot of, again, lack of clarity. If you say Bavel is better than the other places, then it seems like the other places you maybe do need to check. But other people said, no, we don't check. We don't ask. We're on a, whatever we don't know won't hurt us. So let's just leave it alone. We're going to get back to this, balancing game about different approaches and where we go further on in the daf. Right now, we're dealing with what are the boundaries of Bavel. So we talked about the north, the south of the Euphrates, of the Tigris. Now, Amar le'abai Rav Yosef, starting at the top of our daf, lahagisa deprat ad hecha, which Rashi translates as saying on the western boundaries of, what are the western boundaries of the Euphrates? Amar le'mai da'atech, he said, what are you concerned about? In other words, meaning you must have some motive for your question. I guess he must have felt the borders are pretty clear on the west. So he says, Mishum Biram, are you asking because of the city of Biram? Is that what you're worried about? The best of the best of Pumbedita, which Pumbedita was one of the main cities, we talked about this, marries women from Biram or marries men from Biram, meaning we don't really have to worry about yichus from there. And therefore, I'm kind of ignoring your question. It's not really a question. It's obvious what the western boundaries are. And if you're worried about Biram is definitely within the boundaries. Now, you might remember back to Gittin. In Gittin, we had a whole big thing about if you bring a get from abroad, you have to say b'fanei nechtam, b'fanei nechtam, right? It was written in front of me, it was signed in front of me. And because we had two issues, either because there's not a lot of witnesses, right? And as if you're bringing this from abroad, so the witnesses are far away, and therefore we want to have evidence that this was all done the way it was supposed to be done. Or is it an issue of lishma, that people, now bringing it from abroad means bringing it to Israel. Israel was considered, people knew the law, they knew it had to be lishma. Outside of Israel, people didn't really know the law. So there were two things. Number one, it was a very central place, and everybody was going in and out, and therefore, you didn't have to, like in Israel itself, people went back and forth from place to place, and therefore, you don't have to worry about witnesses, people knew, and also you don't have to worry about people not knowing the halacha. Then in the Gemara, they said, Babylonia is just like Israel, which means that Babylonia, because again, once the center moved to Babylonia, it makes sense that they said, well, whatever was true for Israel is going to be true for within Babylonia. And then it's only if you bring it from outside of Babylonia to Babylonia or something like that, you would need to say that. So now the question is, are the boundaries of Babylonia that we just delineated, and there were machlokot between them. We had this one said this city, that one said that city, and we have these arguments. Do they have the same arguments when it comes to get? Is it the same issue? Now, this is an interesting question because, again, is yuchsin a problem? Because, again, in a city where we have rabbis and we have lots of Jewish population, can we assume that things are done the right way and therefore people are miyuchasim? Or does it have to do with geographically? We had Ezra took out and cleaned out Babylonia, so maybe we can assume it stayed clean, and then maybe the boundaries aren't necessarily connected to where people are learning Torah and where the center is. It might be related to something else. And part of what we've been seeing is Yuchsin related to, like the person who wouldn't marry Rabbi Yochanan's daughter. Rabbi Yochanan might have been very knowledgeable, but doesn't necessarily mean his miyuchas. So we have this issue. Is Yuchis compared to it or not? So it would be the same kind of thing here. If we say that the issue for get and where the boundaries of Babylonia are the same for Yuchsin, then we're kind of saying these things work together. Torah, central, what do you call it? A center of Torah place would obviously also forget, people will be knowledgeable, and also for Yichus, whereas Yichus is something different, and therefore the boundaries might be different, because it might depend on where the Jews settled when they came and where Ezra cleaned out. It's hard to know. And that's why, in fact, Rav Papa and Rav Yosef actually have this disagreement. Papa says the exact same thing. Rav Yosef Amar Machloket liyuchsin aval inyan gitin divrei hakol ad arba tinyana de gishra. By get, there's a machloket, but when it comes to the northern boundary of the Euphrates, everyone agrees it's till the arba tinyata, the second. Most people say arba usually means a boat, but here it seems to mean the second lake under the bridge. Okay, remember the bridge we talked about? That was one of the opinions. It's until the bridge. Well, this says that according to Rav Yosef, everyone agrees that when it comes to get, that's the boundary. Only by Yuchsin, there's a bit of a debate here. So right now we have this machloket and we're going to leave this. This is it for this machloket. Is it the same as get, or are the boundaries possibly different for each one? Because again, maybe the nature of the issue is different. Amarami Barham, Chavil Yama Tchelta de Bavel. Now they say this area called the Chavil Yama, which is not exactly clear where it is, seems to be maybe on the Euphrates or cities, bordering the Euphrates down there. So that is the Tchelet of Bavel. Tchelet is something very beautiful. This is the best area of Babylonia, meaning you're going to have the people with the most pure lineage. Shunya Viguvia Tchelta de Chavil Yama. And within this area that's on the water, you're going to have these two cities, Shunya and Guvia, which are the best of that whole area. Which is interesting, because if you say you don't have to worry about it in Babylonia, it's interesting that now you see there's different a range of best lineage, pretty good lineage, compared to other places which are less. Ravina Amar Af Tzitzura, also the city of Tzitzura is also okay. Now this sugya, part of today's daf, you're going to be, why are we learning this, right? This has no practical relevance. We're basically talking about different areas that are in modern day Iraq. Okay, soon we're going to get to places that are possibly even in modern day Iran. Okay, kind of going south. Going northeast of the places that we're discussing. We're going to discuss a bunch of other places further on in the daf. But it seems to be this discussion of all these cities where Jews lived. And again, you're having discussions by people that are trying to say, which cities are what? And some people don't even know what cities they're talking about. Because again, it depends where you lived and what you knew. And, maps in those days were probably not as popular and easily accessible, certainly not as they are today. So anyway, there's a whole discussion of different cities in Babylonia, which again, theoretically, right, first of all, whether this city and that city and this one and that one for us is totally irrelevant. But again, you see how they were dealing with this issue. And the issue is a very relevant issue today. Do you assume people who come from the former Soviet Union, do we have to, one of the things the Rabbanit says is, there wasn't a lot of halacha kept there. There weren't a lot of rabbis, and therefore they're suspicious of people's lineage from there. And they do very serious checks in Israel on people who come from the former Soviet Union and claim their parents were married Jewishly there. And there's a bit of a suspicion. There's cases my husband had to deal with it. They said, there's a lot of people adopted in your region. So perhaps you were adopted, prove you weren't. Okay, which is crazy. But again, you can see there's different approaches here about how much we have to check and how much we don't have to check. Okay, so let's keep going on. Tanya Nami Hafi. So now there's a bright to prove that there was this area where the lineage, people were known to have unflawed lineage. Hanan ben Pinchas Omer, Chavil Yama Tchelta de Bavel, Shunya Viguvia V'Tzitzura Tchelta de Chavil Yama. So this proves, right, the combination of what Rami Bar Abba said and then what Ravina added, which is these are the best of the best area. Amar Papa Va'idna I'arubuhu Kutim. But now our Papa points out, but nowadays it's already not as pure as it was because Kutim, right, the Shomronim, they've already married in, and now you have a bunch of problematic marriages. Below he, but then they say it's not true, or Papa said, which is interesting in general, this machloket, was it true or was it not true? It's true there was a woman who was a kuti who wanted to marry with it, but the rabbis wouldn't let her, and therefore there's nothing to worry about. My Chaval Yama, now they say, well, what is this Chaval Yama area? Now, it's not just us who doesn't know this, even the Amoraim didn't know what they were referring to. This is the Euphrates by the city of Borsi, which also is called Borsif, which is a city we've seen actually in a bunch of different places, but it happens to be a city on the Euphrates in Babylonia. And he says that's the city that's considered the best of the best, right? And again, it was a central city where a lot of things were going on, and a lot of Jews, a lot of rabbis, and because of that, it was known as a good city. And the people there were of unflawed lineage. There was a guy who said, I'm from the city of Shot Mesha. So Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha gets up and he says, oh, you're from that city? That city is between the two rivers, right? The Tigris and the Euphrates. So they say, what's the relevance of him saying that? Why did you say, oh, it happens? Was he just trying to tell people, oh, I know where that is on the map, right? Not really. That wouldn't be why he would say it. Rabbi Chama bar Ukva, Amar Rabbi Yosi bar Rabbi Chanina. So Abai quotes the name of Rabbi Chama bar Ukva, quotes the name of Rabbi Yosi bar Rabbi Chanina. Ben hanaharot harehi kigolat liyuchsin. Between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, all that area is considered like the Golah for Yuchsin. Again, the Golah means the exile, which again either means Babylonia in general, or possibly it even means Pumbedita, which is the big city there, right? It's like Pumbedita, where everybody is known to be of good yichus. So this guy came and said, I'm from Shot Meshot, and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha said, oh, that means we can all marry your children. Or you. Where is this? Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now, where between the Naharot is this? Rabbi Yochanan says, Mi'ihi Dekira Ulael. Okay, Ihi Dekira was one of those northern cities on the northern boundary. He's saying it's more north of that, which already raises a question. What do you mean? Didn't you say that was the northern border? How could it be more north of that? That would be outside of Babylonia, which they say, V'hama Rabbi Yochanan Ama Abrata de Gizma. Didn't he say only until the Ma'abar of Gizma is the border, the northern border, meaning this is above that northern border, and then basically, how could you possibly say this is a place that has good yichus? It's already outside the boundary. Rabbi Ritzu Anaka. So Abai says, no, it was like a strip. Now, the northern boundary is here, okay? And then above that, there's a bit of a strip where a lot of Jews lived, right? Not in the whole area north of that, but just in this little strip that went to that city of Shot Meshot. And that's why he told us it was considered Ben Hanarot, because it's really out of the borders, but it's going to be considered in the boundaries. Amar of Ika bar Avin, Amar of Hanan al-Amarav. Okay, now we're starting to go northeast, okay, which goes either part, which still in Iraq, or partly because Iraq, there's more northeast of the Tigris, or perhaps we're even going into modern day Iran. Okay, so now we're going to start to talk about a bunch of different places in that area. If you have a map, okay, either the Schottenstein or the Koran, the Schottenstein actually is a little more detailed in this case about where a bunch of these places are. But the Koran also has one. So it's helpful to look at maps. You can also, by the way, I Googled it, like ancient Babylonian maps. You can kind of get a sense of where these places are. Chazon Yahavin, so they say it's like the Golah. So even though we're no longer between the Tigris and the Euphrates, these areas were known that Jews lived there, and there were rabbis, and people kept the good yichus. So it's considered like, again, like Pumbedita or like Babylonia. Abai says, Rav Ika bar Avin said this in the name of Rav Hanan and in the name of Rav. Lo tetitule, don't listen to him. It's not true. Why did he say this? His brother had married a woman from there, and he died without children, and he wants to do yibum with the wife. And that's why he's claiming she has good yichus. But basically, he's partial here. He's doing this just for his own sake. And it's not true what he said. So Amalei, Rav Ika bar Avin says, what are you talking about? Didi, atu didihi, what you think I made up this thing? I already told you, to Rav Hananel, it's Rav Hananel who said it in the name of Rav. Azo Shalei Rav Hananel. So they went to check. Is it really true? Did he really say this? So they go check with Rav Hananel. Amarlu hachi amarav chazoni haven harei tegolali yuchsin. He says, yes, in fact, Rav said this. And then, right, it was no longer true when Abai claimed that Rav Ika bar Avin was lying because he was self-motivated to kind of help himself to marry this Yivamah. It's not true. But it happens, it's a machloken, and perhaps that's why Abai thought he was lying. Pliga to Rabbi Abba bar Kahana, the Amar Rabbi Abba bar Kahana, my dechtiv vayanchem b'chalachu v'chavor nahar gozen ba'arei madai. This is a pasuk that's talking about when the Assyrians came. And this is when they took the Israelite kingdom before the the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. It's toward the end of Sefer Melachim, chapter 18. What is it? Yeah, chapter 18 in Melachim Bet. Basically, we have this description. The king of Ashur comes in. He gets rid of the entire Malchut Yisrael, the 10 tribes that are part of Malchut Yisrael, as opposed to the Malchut Yehuda, which was 2 tribes. They take the 10 tribes and they send them off to all different lands. Okay, and here's a list of the lands they sent them to. And the assumption is that these lands basically were places, if the Jews, the 10 tribes, they basically got assimilated into the people there, and therefore there's a problem with the yichus. So and now these places aren't the ones we just said, but Chalach, they say zo chalzon. That's what we were just talking about. Chavor zo hadayib, nahar gozen zo ginza, aremadai zo chamda mechavrotea. Okay, this is all where I said kind of in, somewhere between Iraq and Iran on the border there. Some people say it's Nehavin. So we had Chalzon and we had Nehavin, and both of them seem to appear here as places where the 10 tribes were sent. By the way, flashback went up this morning of Shuli Mishkin, which is all about the 10 tribes and different versions of, what people say or have said throughout the generations about the 10 tribes, where they lived, where they went to, a whole bunch of, I would say, pseudo-historical piece about the 10 tribes, because what the real history is not so clear. My chavroteha, what are the, Nehavin v'chavroteha means, and the cities around it. So what are the cities around it? Amar Shmuel, Krach, Mushchi, Chuski, Virumkin. Okay, again, this doesn't really help us very much. It's telling us the names of cities around it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan v'kulam lifson. Rabbi Yochanan says, just like we kind of assume, which is when we quoted Pligid Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, that Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says these were the places the 10 tribes went to, and Rabbi Yochanan says these are all disqualified places. So that goes against the first approach that we saw here, which was of Rav. The Rav was quoted as saying all these places are, the lineage is good. Again, not all the same places, but some of those places, Chazon and Nahav, how do you pronounce it? Nahavanda? Nihavand. Okay, was also, Rav claimed it was good. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, they're no good. So now they just have an aside here. Shmuel said, what are these places that are chavroteha, which are considered problematic? And he lists mushchi in that list. Now, why is this a problem? Well, they thought, kasagadata, mushchi hanu mushkini. Mushchi and mushkini sound pretty much the same. They thought it was the same place. And do you remember what we saw in the end of yesterday's daf? You might not have paid attention to all these places, but Hamar Rabbi Akiva and Rebbi, mushkini harehi kigolal liyuchsin. So remember we said he'd said ad mushkini, until, and then they say, how could he have said until? Didn't he say it's included? So, they said ad means until and including mushkini. But now he has mushki, which they think is mushkini, on the list of places that are no good. So ela mushki l'chud mushkini l'chud. These might sound the same, but they're not the same places at all. These are 2 totally different places, and therefore nothing to worry about. It shows, by the way, how these later Amoraim weren't familiar with these cities at all, and they're talking about them as if, these 2 things must be the same. First of all, we were talking about all the parts in northeast, of Iraq. And Mushkini was one of the borders by the Tigris and the Euphrates, so clearly it wasn't the same, wasn't in the same area. Now that we mentioned these cities, Chalzon, Hadayib, and Nitzivim, we're now going totally off topic, and we're talking about, and maybe just it's giving us a little bit of history of the lands or something, but we're talking about a Nivuah of Daniel. In the Sefer Daniel, he has a bunch of these visions, these dreams there's one dream with these 4 animals, and each one represents a different nation. So in the midst of that dream, it says, okay, you really have to read the beginning of the pasuk, which we're going to quote in 2 lines, but I'll read it now. Okay, and then there was this animal after the second one, which looked like a bear. And the bear, we're going to see, is a reference to Persia, the Persian kingdom. And then it says about it, and this is what we're up to right now, she has 3 ribs in her mouth, this in his dream, 3 ribs in the mouth of the bear. Those 3 ribs are a reference to 3 cities that are in the mouth of the bear. What's the reference? Sometimes she swallows them up, meaning sometimes the Persians ruled very harshly there. And sometimes it was just, they were jutting out from her mouth, meaning they had somewhat of independence and the Persians weren't ruling over them. So it's a time about these cities that they basically went, sometimes we were ruled by the Persians when we lived there, sometimes we weren't. So now they say, this is the beginning of that verse. which is that look like a bear. Tani Rav Yosef, Elu Parsim. So now we're going to see, and we've seen this about the Persians before. She'ochlim v'shotim kedov, they eat and drink like a bear. Misur balim kedov, they're kind of bulky like a bear. Umegalim se'ar kedov, they're hairy like bears. Ve'ein lehem menucha kedov, and they don't sit still for a minute like a bear. And the other thing we're going to see about them that's really like a bear is they're incredibly strong. And in fact, we saw when we had that list of 10 parts given to the world, and 9 of them, were given to this, and 1 to that. So when it came to strength, the Persians were known for their strength. They were the ones who 9 parts of strength were given to them. Gvura. Rabbi Ami, ki avachaze parsa de rachiv, amar hainu duba ne'ada. When he saw a Persian riding on an animal, he would say, that is a wandering bear. Okay, this was just known. The Persians were called bears. That's how we know it's a reference to Persia here. Amar le Rebbe Levi, ha'eni parsiim, amar lehem domim l'chayalot shel Beit David. And here we see Rebbe says to Levi, I want to, what do Persians look like? He says they are like the soldiers of David HaMelech, which were incredibly strong warriors. Hareni chabarim, those were the Zoroastrians that also were from Medes, which was near Persia. Domim l'malachei chabala. These are people that just go out on attack. Okay, they were maybe, I don't know if they were as strong as the Persians, but they were very rough and came and attacked. Hareni Yishmaelim, domim l'seirim shel Beit HaKisei. The Ishmaelites were like the Seirim is a reference to evil spirits, the evil spirits that lurk in the bathrooms. There was always this concern of evil spirits in the bathrooms. So that because the outhouses were far out from places and they were dark. Those are the Ishmaelim. I want to see Babylonian scholars. They look like angels. Okay, so this is some reference to different nations and what their nature was like, and how the Jews were the more peaceful, the more angel type. Okay, interesting to be thinking about this while we're in a time of war. Okay, there's going to be other statements that also seem to be referencing this. Okay, so now we basically, Rebbe said this to Levi. This was this image of, the different nations. And this was a total aside because we were talking about these places that were conquered by the Persians, that there was this debate about whether they're considered, do they have good yichus or do they not have good yichus? Okay, can we rely on the people or not? And then we just got to this other source, which doesn't seem directly related to our topic, but yes, mentions those places. Now we're going to talk about when Rebbe died. What did he do? What did he say on his deathbed? You might remember this famous story about Rebbe's death, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about a bunch of final things that Rebbe wanted to do. Rebbe is Rabbi Yehuda and Rava before he dies. When Rebbe was about to die, Amal, Homanya Ika beBavel, there's a city called Homanya, Kula Amonaihi. All the people there are descended from Ammon, so don't marry them because you can't marry Ammonim. Misargaria Ika beBavel, there's this other place, Masgaria. Kula de mamzerihi. All the people there are mamzerim, so don't let them marry. Birta Ika beBavel, Shnei Achim yesh shemachlifim nishotihem zelazeh. There happen to be 2 brothers that switch wives all the time, and therefore, again, their kids are mamzerim. So try to find which of these 2 brothers, and he's basically, some people call this whole thing a prophecy. You'll see some of the parts at the end are a prophecy, but it seems like here what he's trying to say is, but it's very interesting. He didn't want to do this when he was alive, clearly. He only, when he was about to die, he said, you know what, I really should tell them things I know about disqualified people so that people don't marry them and we don't have problems down the road. Again, this is the approach to tell people, but on the other hand, he only did it when he died. He didn't do it in his lifetime. Interestingly, he waited till his death. Again, maybe he was worried. We saw the other day that people were going to stone him or something and do something. When he was already dead, it wasn't going to really matter. So anyway, it's unclear why he waits till he dies, but when he dies, he starts to say, you should be concerned about not marrying people from these places. Birta de Satya Ika beBavel. There's another place called Birta de Satya. Now, Satya is listot, which means to leave the path, and that's really what's going to be here. And here he seems to be prophesizing because he clearly doesn't know what's going on there when he's on his deathbed and wherever city he is. And, and he was also in Israel, and now he's talking about the city in Babylonia. That's why some people say the whole thing is a prophecy, because how could he have really known about these cities? So it's possible he's just giving a prophecy about them. Hayom saru mecholei makom ta'ak. Okay, these people today are leaving, left the religion. Okay, or they're going to leave the religion today. What happened? Ta'ak peperi b'kvarei b'shabta. Okay, there was a ditch kind of got filled with water on Shabbat and full of fish, and they started catching all the fish on Shabbat, which is forbidden. Right, azal tzadu b'shabta. They caught them all. Right, and it was kind of pond. They caught the fish from the pond. And because that's forbidden to do on Shabbat, Shamtinu Rabbi Akiva and Rebbi, he put them all in excommunication. V'ishtamud, when he excommunicated them all, they all decided to leave the religion. They became heretics. So basically, he's saying this is a city full of heretics. There's a place called Akra Da'ag of the Agam, of the lake. Adabar Ava Yeshba. There's a person called Adabar Ava, which, by the way, is a little problematic because Adabar Ava wouldn't. The timing doesn't match up here. Some people claim it's a different girsa. It's not Rav Adabar Ava. It's somebody else. Some people say it could be there's just two people with the same name, even though it's a pretty unique name. Moving now to Amubet, and what does he say about Rav Adabar Ava? Hayom Yoshev b'cheko shel Avraham. This is why it's clearly a prophecy. He's getting circumcised today, meaning there's a baby who's 8 days old who's going to be later known as Rav Adabar Ava. Okay, now he's Adabar Ava. He's obviously not a Rav. He's only 8 days old, but he's going to have a bris today, and he's obviously going to be an important rabbi. And Hayom Nolav Rabbi Yehuda b'Bavel. And today, the day I die, Rabbi Yehuda in Babylonia is going to be born. To Amar Mar, as someone said, Kishemet Rabbi Akiva nolad Rebbi. Okay, on the day that Rabbi Akiva died, Rebbi was born. Again, it might not necessarily mean exactly on the day, but it basically means Rabbi Akiva died and Rebbi was born. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Kishemet Rebbi nolad Rav Yehuda. So when Rebbi died, Rav Yehuda was born. Kishemet Rav Yehuda nolad Rava. When Rav Yehuda died, Rava was born. Kishemet Rava nolad Rav Ashi. When Rava died, Rav Ashi was born. L'lamdecha, to teach you, she'ein tzaddik niftar min ha'olam ad shenivrat tzaddik k'moto. A righteous person does not die in this world until there's someone basically to replace him. Shene'amar v'zarach hashemesh uva hashemesh. Okay, they quote a very famous pasuk from Kohelet. Basically, right, the sun rises and the sun sets. So basically, ad shelo kaftashim shoshel Eli zar hashim shoshel Shmuel haramati. And they basically say the person we learn this from is Shmuel and Eli. So just as Eli was losing his prophecy, Shmuel was born and he was going to be the next prophet. Right, the candle of God, before it went out, Shmuel was lying there, right? And basically what it means is the ner of God, the candle of God is the prophecy that he gave to Eli, was now going to move to Shmuel. Okay, so now what do we have here? We have that, this is a list, by the way. There's a bunch of interesting things about this. This is kind of somebody saying historically, right, whether it's true or not, what they're trying to say is, right, there's a turning over of the generations. And these are all, by the way, skipped generations, because when he died, the guy was born. It doesn't mean he became a leader in his stead. There was someone in between, right? There was a generation in between Rabbi Akiva and Rebbi. There was a generation in between Rebbi and Rav Yehuda, right? Rebbi was the teacher of Rav and Shmuel, and Rav Yehuda was the student of Rav and Shmuel. So, but what we're saying is, and there's even more generations between some of the, right, Rava, no, the truth is Rava was, right, Rav Yehuda was 2nd generation, Rava was 4th generation, and Rav Ashi was 6th generation. It makes sense here. What they're also trying to say is these are the people that were the real passers down of the tradition. It's another way of saying, if you look at our great rabbis, it's singling out a bunch of rabbis. Some of them, it's clear why they're being singled out. Well, Rabbi Akiva, we know why he was singled out, although it's not like there weren't other great rabbis of his generation, but he really was a main leader. And then we have Rebbi, who was attributed to him the writing, right, the organizing of the Mishnah, the editing of the Mishnah. Rav Ashi was the one who gets attributed the editing of the Gemara. So those two are very clear because they were the ones who put together these books that we're using that are so central. You know, the others, Rava, first of all, is the main, right? Him and Abai are almost on, very many pages of the Gemara, and he's the one who we hold like. So obviously, if he's going to make it in there before Abai, and Rav Yehuda was really the pastor down of Rav and Shmuel's Torah, so I guess because of that, he gets put in here. So anyway, we have a very interesting source here about the way the world works, okay, and the way tzaddikim. Tziva Hashem liYaakov svivav tzarav. Okay, this is a pasuk from Eicha. What does this mean? Rav Yehuda Amar Kigon Homanya Lepum Nahar. Okay, this is basically saying that our enemies, and this is why I said it's very relevant to today, our enemies, this is, one second, I just want to check my thing before I say this, one second. Yeah. Romania is close to Persia. Where's that? I see. Okay. Right. The reason this is brought up is because Homania, they said, was a city of Ammonites. And then they're saying here that Tziva Hashem liYaakov svivav tzarav, which is basically God commanded to Yaakov that he's always going to have, the Jewish people are always going to be surrounded by enemies. And Rabbi Yehuda says, right, even when they go to exile, it's not just when they're living in Israel, but even in exile, and which unfortunately we know also, Rabbi Yehuda says Homania is near Pum Nahara. okay, which has Jewish residents, and that I see, because Homanu was the Ammonim, and that's near Pum Nahara, which is where there's Jewish residents. So they're saying that's an example where there were Ammoni residents that were living near the Jews and trying to make problems for them. Okay, now we're moving to a Nevuah Yechezkel. He says, while I was prophesying, Paltayahu ben Benayahu met. Okay, this guy, which we don't really know who he is yet, died. That's what Yechezkel says. Ve'epol al panai ve'ezak kol gadol. Okay, we have no idea why this is connected. We're going to see in a minute. And I fell down on my face and I cried out a huge scream when I heard he died. Ve'omar aha adoni Hashem. Okay, and I said, oh wow, behold God, our God. So Rav Shmuel, this big debate about why he screamed. There's two reasons you can scream. One is because he was such a great guy and I can't believe he died. Or one is to say he was a terrible person and I can't believe he died so peacefully. Okay, he should have died a torturous death for what he did. So we're going to have two totally different approaches to this. Paltayahu ben Benayahu was he a good guy or a bad guy? And the first one that says he was a good guy is going to have to do with lineage issues. And that's why this is brought up. Manda Amar L'Tova, the one who said it was for good, he had the Istandra de Meshan, the governor or leader of Meshan, was Chatne de Nebuchadnezzar. He was the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar. So there was this relationship between Nebuchadnezzar, who brought about the second destruction of the second temple, and the Jews and their destruction. His son-in-law ruled in the city in an area called Meshan. Shalach le mikule hai shavya de itilach lo shadar len de kai lekaman. In all of the captives you took, Nebuchadnezzar, you didn't send me anyone to work for me. Like, why didn't you send any of them to Meshan? So he wanted to send Jewish, what do you call them? Plitim, refugees that he had captured from Israel. He wanted to send them. Paltiyahu ben Benayahu says to Nebuchadnezzar, we're important. You should keep us for you. And take our slaves, take our Canaanite slaves and send them to Meshan. This is Paltiyahu ben Benayahu was a good guy. He was basically trying to protect the Jews from being sent to Meshan. Not that it was necessarily better there, but I guess in the end they ended up in Babylonia, and that was a good thing, and it kept the Jews together. So send them someone else. Mamar Navi, right? Send the Avadim there, send other people there, and not the Jews. So when he died, Yechezkel said, Misha sa tova b'Yisrael yamut b'chatzi yamav. Okay, someone who did such good for the Jewish people is going to die so young. How could it be? And that's why he cried. So the assumption now of this version is that Meshan is full of Canaanite slaves. Okay, which means that what? That Meshan, if there's Jews living there now, there's a concern that maybe they assimilated with these Canaanite slaves, and therefore there'd be a problem with the Yichus. Okay, we're going to get back to that soon. Manda Amar L'Ra'ah, if you say he cried out in horror, like, how could he die such a nice death in his bed? And he should have died a much more torturous death because he was a terrible person. Dichtiv, how do we know this? Well, there's a different vision Yechezkel talks about. Vataveoti, and this comes up in other places in the Gemara, Vataveoti al Shar Beit Hashem HaKadmoni, HaPoneh Kadima. So God, right, I was brought in this vision, I was brought to the temple of God on the west, the eastern entrance, right, which points to the gate that points eastward. Okay, if you remember, all the gates are in the east, and basically the sanctuary is in the west. When I get to this entranceway of the gate, there's 25 ish, there's 25 people there. And who do I see among them? Yozniyahu ben Uzal, bet Paltiyahu ben Benayahu Sareha. I see these important people in the nation that are there, and one of them is this Paltiyahu ben Benayahu. Uchtiv, and it also says, so then I'm brought into this inner sanctuary. In the entrance, right between the ulam and the mizbeach, that's this big small area that's right in between the altar to the entrance to the sanctuary. There's 25 people, which we assume are the same 25 as before. Their backs are to the sanctuary. They're facing east, right? It's the opposite way you're supposed to be facing. You're supposed to be facing the sanctuary. They're facing the opposite way. Now, there's something weird about this. So it says their backs are to the sanctuary and they're facing east. Now, if they're facing east, then obviously their backs are to the sanctuary. So you don't need to say both. It's clear where you're standing. Here's this disgusting image. Okay, they would flatulate there and they would take off their clothes, and basically they're their backs were facing toward God, and they were basically creating a disgrace in the temple. And who's among these people? Pnei, right? Paltiel ben Benayal. So, you're right. It's defecating. Sorry, my mistake. It's defecating right there in the temple. So now they say, how can it be that someone who did some horrible, disgusting thing would die on his bed? Okay, those are the two versions. So either he was a good person who saved the Jews from being taken to Meshan, or who went to advocate for them in front of Nebuchadnezzar, and the assumption is he succeeded, that Nebuchadnezzar listened to him, or it's that he was a bad person, he was part of these 25 people that were doing horrible things in the temple. And we saw it was Rav and Shmuel, and we didn't know who said who. Well, now they're going to say it must be Shmuel who said it was bad. And that's not the important part, but that we've seen before. That Shmuel says, now we're going to see that there was more to his statement. Mushkini is a good city, meaning in terms of yichus. Meshon, which is the place we're talking about, lo chashula lo mishum avdut lo mishum mamzerot. In Meshan, we don't need to worry at all about mamzerut. We don't need to worry about avdut. We don't need to worry the people, right, that there are slaves there. There aren't slaves there. Okay, no, there aren't slaves there. Obviously, he doesn't buy, right? He doesn't buy into the first story, because the first story said the slaves were sent there. The only thing you have to worry about in Meshan, and this isn't connected really, but there were Kohanim who married divorcees, and that you have to worry about. So you have to worry about chalalim, but you don't have to worry about mamzerim or avadim. So it must be that Shmuel is the one who holds that. To which the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. And now they're going to be smart about this, quote something else Shmuel said, which is going to prove that Shmuel could hold by the first version, that he was good, and we'll see why. Shmuel is consistent with what he says. Damal, might remember this from earlier in the Masechet. There's whole machloket. If someone makes their slave ownerless, is the slave automatically free, or do they still need a document of emancipation, a get? So, according to Shmuel, you don't. Now, obviously, if the Jews had to give up their slaves to go to Meshan, because that's what Nebuchadnezzar said, they obviously have what we call yeush. They gave up on never getting them back. In which case, it's hefker. They were ownerless. In which case, they're freed. So even if technically slaves went there, they weren't slaves by the time they got there. And therefore, there's no slaves there anyway, even according to the first version. How do we know that the Eved Sheyatzah L'chirut doesn't need to get shichur? This we learned already, but we're going to quote it again. Shneimar, Kol Eved Ish Miknat Kesef. When they talk about the avadim that are acquired by the owners, they call it the slave of a man. Well, Eved Ish v'lo Eved Isha, what do you mean? You could have a slave of a woman also. So why does it say the slave of a man? Ela Eved sheyesh lo reshut l'rabo alav karoi Eved. Eved she'ein l'rabo reshut alav ein karoi Eved. If you're a slave whose master is in charge of you, meaning you're an Eved Ish, you're an Eved to somebody, then you're a slave. But if you don't have an Ish above you because you were taken away to someone else and your Jewish owner is no longer the owner, right? He makes you ownerless, then you're not going to be called an Eved anymore. And therefore, Shmuel could follow the first version, so we don't really know who holds what. Now, okay, let's just review before we move on. So what we have so far in the stuff, we talked about the boundaries of Babylonia. We talked about all sorts of cities that are considered like Babylonia, that have really good lineage. We talked about, then we got on a sidetrack about some of these places from the Nevuah of Daniel. And then we got into, right, and we had a big machloket about some of these places that are more in the Iran or border Iran-Iraq area, that are not in the central Babylonian area. Are they have good yichus or do they not have good yichus? So we saw all different opinions about that. We then got into Rebbi when he died, and he basically went on a tirade about a bunch of places and said, don't marry people from these places. From there, right, he said a few other things. We got off into this thing about the tzaddik dying and then the new tzaddik being born on the same day. And then we got into these places we got into this thing about Paltiel ben Benayal, because one of the versions perhaps had to do with the status of people living in Meshan. In the end, we said not necessarily. Okay, now we're going to say something very big. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Zo Divrei Rabbi Meir. Now there's a big debate. What is Rabbi Meir? Okay, he's going to say in a minute though. Aval Chachamim Omrim, but the rabbis say, Kol Aratzot B'Chezkat Kashrut Hem Obdot. Now, even though we saw these rabbis, and even Rav Yehuda himself, who, remember, he wouldn't marry his son to anybody, because he said, I'm worried about the yichus. And that was even in Babylonia, right? And then we had all these statements that Babylonia is better than Israel, which is better than all the other places. And that Babylonia, you don't have to worry, but in other places you do have to worry. So it's not exactly clear what this statement is about. Perhaps it's about this line about all the nations, right, are worse than Israel, and Israel is worse than Babylonia, and Babylonia is really the best. but all the other places you really have to worry. Or perhaps he's talking about the Mishnah, which said that, and that's the most likely that we're saying the Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, which is that Ezra cleaned out Babylonia, but brought all these psulim to Israel, which means basically you have to worry in Israel. There's mamzerim, there's netinim, there's all these people mixed in. So he comes and says, this is all Rabbi Meir, meaning all the being strict about this is Rabbi Meir's approach, but the rabbis disagree. And they say, and this is a big line, that all lands are b'cheskat kashrut hamomdot. You don't have to start doing background checks about anybody from any land. Okay? No, Ken, right? No worries. So So Mechoza, which was apparently outside, even though it's usually considered in Babylonia, was outside the borders for the purposes of Yichus. But a Meimar allowed Rav Huna bar Natan to marry a woman from there. Amalei Rav Ashi, he says, why? What are you relying on? Are you relying on the Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Zodivei Rabbi Meir v'Chachamim Omrim Kol Ha'aretz B'Chizkat Kashrut Hamomdot? Did you not check her out because you relied on this statement that Rabbi Yehuda quoted Shmuel as saying? How could you possibly say this? V'ha be'Rav Kahana lo ma'nehacha u'be'Rav Papa lo ma'nehacha u'be'Rav Zvi lo ma'nehacha. Says the following three big rabbis, Rav Kahana, Rav Papa, and Rav Zvi, none of them learned it that way. Meaning they had different versions, maybe of the statement of Rav or of the Mishnah. They had a whole different version, and they thought that this is everyone's opinion, that you have to be worried about all these other places. But Meimar, even though he was criticized by Rav Ashi for this, afilu hachi lo kibla mine, he didn't accept Rav Ashi's statement. Mishum d'shmiya lemi Rav Zvi din hardia. He heard from Rav Zvi otherwise. Interesting. There's a debate about what Rav Zvi himself said. So you can see that this big debate continued throughout. This is already the time of the end of the Amoraim. Continued throughout. Do we passel people? Do we not passel people? Can we assume? Can we just assume that everyone's kosher, or do we have to go checking? Okay, so it's a big question that's really not resolved. Now we're going to have another machloket, and we'll finish our daf with this machloket. Mamzeret Tana Rabbanan. Mamzeret unitine tehorim la'atid lavo divrei Rabbi Yosi. And this really goes back to the pasuk we darted at the very beginning of yesterday's daf. Are the mamzerim and netinim going to be all purified? Is basically, is God going to basically say there is no such thing anymore? We're done with mamzerim. Okay, everyone who was a mamzer can now marry. That's what Rabbi Yosi says. And it's part of this utopian world that we won't have people who can't marry you. Rabbi Meir Omer ain't tehorim. They will not become purified. If you're a mamzer, you'll be a mamzer. Now, where this goes, right? What about kevan shenisma'u nisma'u? Again, there's this assumption that Eliyahu is going to come and the people who are no mamzerim are going to be kind of separated out from the people. But still people believe that the ones who aren't clear and already assimilated are not necessarily going to be now pointed out and say, okay, you're a mamzer, you're a mamzer. Even according to Rabbi Meir. Obviously, according to Rabbi Yosi, everyone's going to be tahor. Amar lo Rabbi Yosi, palo kfar ne'amal. Now here he's going to quote the Pesukim. It says, a very famous Pasuk, because we have this a lot in our prayers, certainly in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time. I'm going to sprinkle on you purified waters, and you're going to become pure. What does that mean? If not, I'll purify you from being mamzerim. Amar lo Rabbi Meir. It says, I'm going to purify you from all your impurities, and I'm going to purify you from idols. It doesn't say mamzerut there. It says impurities, which we know is like impurity, all sorts of other impurities, and idols. But it says utahartem in the beginning, and I will purify you. And then it says at the end of the pasuk, it says right from your tumah and from all your idols ataher etchem. It says it again. I'm going to purify you. That must be adding something additional. Another purity thing, which is I'm going to purify you from mamzerim. That's Rabbi Yosi's proof. Bishlam ala Rabbi Meir. So now they bring this other pasuk, which fortunately to me resonates in terms of what's happening today. Hainu dichtiv vayashav mamzer ba'ashdod. Okay, not yet, but we're going to get there. So it says in this pasuk in Zechariah, he has this again talking about the future and the world to come. The mamzer is going to sit in Ashdod. So according to Rabbi Meir, it makes sense. That meaning we're going to separate out the mamzerim and they're going to be in Ashdod. So there still will be mamzerim. Elul Rabbi Yosi, my vayashav mamzer ba'ashdod. So they say, mamzer doesn't mean mamzer. It means me'am zal, from a foreign nation. And the way it is explained, Kid Matargim Rav Yosef, as he translated this pasuk, Yatvun Beit Yisrael leruchtzim ba'arahon tahavudamu ba'al lenuchraim. The Jews are going to sit comfortably in a land that was once the other nations claimed it was theirs, and now the Jews are going to sit comfortably in Ashdod, right? It couldn't resonate now about people not sitting comfortably in Ashdod in that area of the country. But one day they will sit in this ideal utopian world. They will sit there comfortably, that once other nations claimed was theirs, they will then be able to sit there comfortably. So that's the future vision. It has nothing to do with mamzerim, even though the word mamzer is used, is not meant really to be understood as mamzer. That's how Rav Yosef explains. Now we get to an important line. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, halacha ke Rabbi Yosi. Okay, so again, Rabbi Yehuda paskins here in the name of Shmuel, just like he paskined before that we assume everyone's kosher. It seems to go hand in hand with, and not only that, but all mamzerim in the future will be tahor, which is why we don't have to be pushing to check everyone's Judaism, because in the end, right? In the end anyway, God's going to purify everybody. There's no ideal to keep these people forever separated. And Amar Rav Yosef, he loved Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yosi, hava ate Eliyahu mapik minan savarane koreledin. And he says basically, if it weren't for this statement of Rabbi Yosi, Eliyahu would come and handpick out all the people that are psulim. But since Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel says halacha Rabbi Yosi, that's not what's going to happen in the future. Now, there's a big debate about even the one who says that it's not going to be purified. The question is, what does this mean? Does this mean basically Eliyahu is going to show whoever was, mixed in already, or is it only people that were clearly mamzerim that have the name mamzer on them? They're going to stay mamzerim, but not necessarily that we're going to basically, raise up all the ones that got assimilated in. So again, we have these different viewpoints about, is there an ideal to keep the mamzerim separate, or is it not an ideal? And should we just let it go if once they're mixed in, just leave it? Or do we have to kind of, dig up and try to find about everybody's lineage? And we still have a bit of lack of clarity, although you do see the Peskei Halacha siding on the side of, once they were mixed in, they were mixed in, and this issue of, right, also here, that in the future, there won't be a thing of mamzerim. Some people say, by the way, God will purify all mamzerim, but from then on in, they're going to have mamzerim also. Once someone then after that marries, it's like a one-time thing. They'll be purified, but then after that, there could be mamzerim as well. So there's all different explanations of what exactly both these opinions really mean of Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Meir. And, there's all different ways of understanding them and different details about them. So I'm just giving you the global picture. But anyway, very interesting issues, even though, like I said, some of our daf is very not relevant, but some of it was incredibly relevant about how we deal with mamzer issues. That's it for today. Wishing everybody a good day and should hope for good news.